All right, so welcome to the first ever project week in the computer science program. This is something that we started with CS11, you guys. So you guys have been used to project weeks as you've been going along. CS10 did not have them though, so here we are launching into the first project week of computer science, which should be fun. So a little bit of scheduling stuff. I want to try to keep this pretty much exactly the same as the previous project weeks that you've had schedule-wise, but I do have a question for you guys about the 8 a.m. Meetings. So right now on the calendar, we've got an 8 a.m. for today, and then a 9 a.m. for tomorrow and the next day. And I was asking for clarification from Ryan Hamblin why those others were at 9 a.m. and not 8 a.m. And he wasn't sure. It seems like that's how the ancients did it. But I was going to ask you guys if you had a preference for the next 2 days. It seemed to me that 8 a.m. made more sense because it doesn't break up the day. Plus, if you have questions from the previous day, it seems to make more sense to answer them at 8 than it does to answer them at 9. But I guess my question is, if anybody feels really strongly that we should meet at 9 tomorrow and the next day, I'd like to move that to 8. Where everybody's just like, 8, 9. It's all the same.
8's fine, but you can make a poll if you want, but 8's good.
That's right. Polly for the win. All right. So that'll be, so today we'll meet now in the morning, describe the project, get you guys kicked off on that. And then you can work on the project until meeting with the PMs at the end of the day. And then we'll have a similar process for Tuesday and Wednesday. On Thursday, we won't meet in the morning. You'll just keep working on the project, but Thursday afternoon, we'll do project demos so we can see what you guys have put together. Whatever the client wants. I guess technically that's kind of the correct answer for what time. Burritos for everybody. That'd be nice if I could pull that off. Okay. All right. Let's see. What am I missing? And then Friday, you guys have to do with as you please, which hopefully is a nice respite. I know we haven't talked about what the project is yet, but any questions so far on that procedure? Everybody's good? Okay, let's see here. All right, so this is the repo. Some of you may have noticed that after I accidentally posted it on Friday. I do want to point out some stuff at the beginning of this. I'm going to let Brady talk about the project itself, but there is a bit more procedural stuff here. This section about Trello and about to-dos and so on, this is copied pretty much straight from the previous projects you guys have already done. So I'm assuming you probably already have a Trello account and you're already familiar with backlog and to-do and in progress and all that stuff. This is good practice for labs where you'll be using Trello in a multi-user sense. Lots of people using that to organize the entire project. So good practice there. Keep doing that for this project. And then also, I swear there was something down here I was going to talk about. I can't remember now. It must have been something Brady was going to say. One more thing I can talk about here is in the Adventure Project Designs directory, this has some wireframes in it and an example implementation here. So you can follow these wireframes to get an idea of what the functionality is that you need, but I really hope that your finished product doesn't actually look like this. Be creative here, not only in how this looks, but like we were discussing on iOS. I know you're not doing iOS, but if this were an iOS app, people would, instead of typing north, south, east, and west to move around, there might be like a little D-pad on the interface, or maybe the screens have more information outputted somewhere around here. But this is just sort of a minimum amount of functionality. The MVP would do something like this. Feel free to push that more. And if you have questions about whether your changes are going to fulfill the MVP or not, just ask one of us and we'll let you know. Probably yes. I think that's all I have before turning it over to Brady for talking more about what the project actually is. Any questions on any of this? Any of the procedural stuff? Does it have to be Heroku, or can we deploy wherever? We hadn't discussed that, but I don't see any reason why you couldn't deploy wherever. Do you have any objection, Brady? As long as it's something that can be, the idea is we want this to be demoable. Like if somebody who was going to hire you came and looked at it, they could run it and see it running. So as far as I'm concerned, I think as long as it's deployable somewhere or executable somehow, then.
Yeah, I agree with that. I don't have a problem with it being deployed not on Heroku. I think the one concern is if you need help, then we don't guarantee any assistance for a technology that's not Heroku. So it might be safe to stick with that just so you have a wider variety of people to ask questions of.
I mean, we will try to help. We just can't.
Yeah, I can't guarantee any anything.
All right. I think then I'll give it over to Brady, who can talk about how this thing is put together, and then we can get into the meat of the thing.
All right, cool. I'm just going to share my screen, which has the same thing up. All right. So you may have already noticed that this project is very similar to your week 1 project, which is to make a LambdaMUD. Now, the one major difference is that this is running online, which allows it to be a true MUD. If you remember, the MU stands for multi-user. So this will allow you to have multiple users. There's a few reasons why we wanted to build on this. One is that this is intended to be a more of a front-end project than a back-end project. So there's a lot of server code, but the server code is already written and is structured very similarly to a project you've already done. Also, since you've done a lot of the things like token auth and deploying to Heroku, then that stuff shouldn't take too much of your time, which should allow you to spend most of your week on making the front end look nice and working on the front end half of the API since you've implemented the back end. There's a couple of other new things. Since it's a multi-user now, you need to have multiple users able to log in with different usernames, and you should be able to see the activity of the other users, which is where the Pusher library comes in. So Pusher, if you look up pusher.com, is a service that it's a really nice interface for using WebSockets. So what WebSockets are is it allows a two-way connection between a client and a server. So usually the way that you get information or you update your front end, your client, is you send a request to the server and you get a response. So you send a request and you get a response. But if you don't send any requests, your page doesn't update. Now you can sort of achieve this by polling. So you send a request to the server every 5 seconds or so, say like, hey, are there any updates? No? Okay. Wait 5 seconds. Are there any updates? No? Okay. And polling works for certain apps, but if you have something like a game or a chat app, for example, you don't want to you don't want to have that 5-second delay. So, I mean, you can turn the polling frequency up, but then you're going to overload your server. So in this case, we have something called WebSockets. Now you can read, if you look at the bottom of the page, or not at the bottom, if you look at the top, there's this nice link which has a lot of history about what WebSockets are. So I'm not going to go into that. But basically, you're creating this one-to-one connection with a pusher, using the pusher API that allows you to send messages to anyone who's connected on the socket. Now, this is a really cool technology for you all to pick up. If you ever have a job where, for example, you need to implement chat, or where you need to send updates to the client app. When I say clients, I'm talking about the clients, like the app, not the client who's hiring you to do the job. Although I may use both instances of client in this case. But anyway, so this is a really good library to know. It's very simple. I guess it's not so simple. It's simple once you get it. Like, there's very little code that you need to write. Basically, you're subscribing to a channel, and this can be independent for each different user. You have an event, like say broadcast. You subscribe to a channel. You bind to event, which says whenever this event is sent to this channel, then you receive this message. So again, it's very good for using for chat apps or for this MUD. And the pricing, it's free. It's free up to, I think, 200,000 messages. Yeah. Client is the front end, but it's also confusing because client is also the person who's giving you your requirements. That's a different kind of client. So not this kind of client. All right, so you're going to be implementing Pusher, which will allow you to see when someone else enters the room. Let me see is it in this thing? All right, it doesn't say here. But okay, say if I'm standing in this room and then someone else walks in, you should get a message that says like, Joe has entered the room. So that's something that that's built in right now, but you'll need to implement the front end. So let's take a look at a little bit of this code. So since this is supposed to be a front end project, we've built out a lot of the back end for you already. So if you look at this, let's look at Move right now. If you look at Move, actually, let's start with models, since we can start from the ground up. If we look at the models, this should look very, very, very similar to what you implemented in week 1. So you have a player model and you have a room model. Player, you have your current room, and each player is associated with the user to a one-to-one via a one-to-one connection. So whenever you create a user, that's what this code says. Whenever you create a new user via registration, it will create a new player, which you can access through user.player. And then each player will have a current room. It will have the username is in the user. So the user object will have the username. And then it has this unique identifier, which is used for pusher subscription. You initialize it, you set the current room, and then this is a way to get the room. And then same with room. You have these north 2, south 2, east 2, west 2, and you have connect room functions. And then there's also these functions to get all of the players in the room. Now, this is all built out for you. So so again, you should be able to understand what's going on here. But since it's very similar to week 1, you shouldn't have to write too much code here, if any. Now, if we get to our views, which I named API since it's in the API, should also look very similar to what you did in week 1. So if the direction is north, then you set the next room to the room.north to, south to, etc., etc. Now the new thing is these pusher commands. So as we mentioned, each player will subscribe to their own personal channel, which happens in initialize. So each player will have their UUID, which is universal unique identifier. It's a long random string. And you need to make sure to subscribe to a channel called p-channel- whatever the player's UUID is. So when you enter a room, you will see you send out this message. So for PUUID and current player UUIDs, this is just a list of all the players that are in the room besides yourself. You can see that in the model where that's implemented. So player UUIDs. Yeah, you can take a look at this. It will send this message to all of them. So you'll get this message that says, like, if it was me, it would say Brady has walked north. So that has left the room. And in the next room, you'll see a message that says Brady has entered from the south. Again, this is all implemented already. So you should be able to run it and see these messages. And you can test it using these API commands. So, yeah, I think, am I running this right now? I don't think I have it up. But anyway, so if you pull this this directory and you clone it and you run the server, do all of these things, which you should all be familiar with. Get pipium running, make your migrations. Okay, this is something. Open up the shell and run create world. Create world. This should also look very similar to week 1. So you import your models. This is clearing out all of the old rooms, and then you're initializing all these rooms, making connections, and then this just sets all the current players to the current outside room. So once you create your worlds, then you should be able to run all of these commands. So curl is a really good way. You can use Postman or any other API testing service, but you should be able to do commands to log in. Well, first you register, create a new user. You'll get an auth key. You can also log in and get the same auth key, and then you'll initialize. Use sending the authorization key in the header to this init endpoint. And init will give you your UUID, which again, you use to subscribe to the pusher channel. It will give you the name of the current user. It'll give you the room that you're currently in and the description of the room. And it will also send this list of player names. And again, this is so you can see, like, if I'm in a room with Beej, it will say Beej here. And then you can say Beej is standing here in your front end. And then you should also be able to move using this command. Again, send the header. This is very important. This is how the server knows what user you're talking about, because this auth token will be unique, and it will be able to find the current user via this auth token. You send the direction, and you should be able to get this message of the next room that you're in. And then you need to have some way to display this in your front end. And then the one last thing you'll have to implement is you'll have to implement this command, which is basically say. So this should not be too much code, and if you understand what's going on with the move commands, then say should not take you very long to implement. The code is very similar to move, and it should only be probably less than 20 lines of code. Definitely less than 20 lines, maybe like 10 lines of code. And then that's all you'll have to do for the server. Everything else should be working. And when I say should, there may be bugs, and if there's bugs, then definitely let me know. Again, this is our first time running through this, so So there may be bugs, but yeah, the trick is figuring out definitely which 10 lines. And I will say that the harder part will be understanding what's going on with Pusher, making sure you get like, all right, how do you subscribe? What's the difference between subscribing to a channel and binding to an event? And for all that, I recommend looking at the Pusher docs. There's a ton of good Pusher docs. And Pusher is great because it works, it's very, very many platforms. It's Django, it works with Node, it works with MERN, the whole MERN stack. On the front end, it works with web, it works with JavaScript, it works with React, with iOS, with Android, with all sorts of things. With Ruby on Rails, which is where I first used Pusher. I built the server for an iPhone game that's currently live on the store and is working quite well. All right, what else do I need to talk about? Oh, we can talk about these features. So as you can see, there's not very many server requirements. Basically, you need to run it, make sure that everything works with the existing endpoints, which it should. Deploy it to Heroku, or you can deploy it to any live server, and then implement the stay command. But on the front end, this is where most of the work will come in. So you need to have a login screen where you have fields like in these wireframes. We have these wireframes, so you need to have a way to log in, put the password, connect. You need to be able to create an account. And again, these endpoints are already live here. If you have questions about those endpoints, feel free to ask. But mostly, if I did my job correctly, then all of those API calls should work. Your job is to create the front end. And you need to store, upon login and upon account creation, you need to store the auth token. That's this key. And with that auth token, you can send these other commands, which goes in the header. And the structure of this header is very important. Yeah, presumed default is that you'll be using React. So I think that's about it. And then these front end goals are pretty basic. If you're quick, if you get everything that's going on, and if you don't run into any roadblocks, this should not take too long. Maybe one day or so, which is why we have a ton of stretch goals. And this is where hopefully some of you will take this and run. So once you understand how everything works, you can add things to the game commands, or you can, if you're into graphs, you can do things with the map. So expand the world map, add search functions using breadth first search. If you want to get into some more web technologies in addition to Pusher, you can look into Celery, which is an event task handler, which can allow you to do timed events like an NPC that wanders around, or maybe that will search for players. You can do combat. There's a ton of things you can do. If you're not as interested in the game aspects and you want something more, I noticed in chat that some people who are not gamers, of course I'm a gamer, so I love these things. But if you're more interested in something that's like more enterprise, or more, or could be useful for a non-game thing, then these different chat things are good things to look into. So you should be able to, like, if you wanted to implement Slack, it's not too far of a reach between Slack and this game. So you should be able to send chats. You should be able to create new rooms. And we have these rooms that are like, you're in the foyer, but you can just as well have a room that says this is the CS11 classroom, or this is the something and something chat room. You can feel free to stretch like that. What that comes down to is you're going to need to fudge the navigation of the rooms a little bit, and you're going to need to manage your channels and how you broadcast different commands. But that's totally an option too. Once of course you have your MVP down, and before you do any of that, before you go into the chat, into expanding into different chat things, you need to get PM approval on your MVP. But really, we're giving you a lot because we hope that you can you can get it done and then move into like stretch it beyond this. And this should be something that you can put in your portfolio. So I think that a lot of you will be able to take it in some unique directions. I guess last thing is that again, this is a front end focused project. So if you're stuck on the server, let us know. We don't want you to put too much time into the server. Like out of your 3.5 days, that we're hoping that you don't. And part of that hope is because you just spent a whole week going through Heroku stuff, going through Django, and deploying. And yeah, and then you should spend a lot of time making the front end look nice. All right, I think I've gone over everything that I want to say. I know I went over a lot of stuff fast. So are there any questions? Shout. Yeah, shout. Yeah, if you can, you should be able to shout a command, and then everybody in the entire game will see. Like Thomas has shouted hello. Versus a whisper, which is like Thomas whispered to Beej something, and only Beej should be able to see what the actual message is. So that's a way of implementing DMs. All right. Seems like there aren't any questions. I'm sure that once you dive in, there will be more questions, or I hope there will be more questions, unless you are all just totally rocking it and you don't need our help at all.
I've got a few more things to add if there aren't any questions, or even if there are, I have more things to add. Did you wrap up there, Brady?
Yeah.
Cool. It says right at the beginning of the instructions that you'll need a pusher account, and that should be free and easy to get. But let us know if you have any troubles there. Let's see here. It looks like 8 a.m. has the winning number of votes, so let's just do 8 a.m. tomorrow on Wednesday. And let's see here. I guess the other thing I want to say here is that this has gone very similarly to pretty much every kickoff call I've ever had, or every tech kickoff that I've had when I was working in the field. So you meet up with the client, there's this massive information dump that's kind of overwhelming, and a lot of it you don't know exactly what to do with at the moment. You're like, okay, I kind of see what the client wants. We see that we want to have this front end that looks nice, that you can do these things in. We see that the takeaway for me typically at this point would be there's a bunch of server code, and I kind of have an overview of how that works, sort of, but I'm going to have to go back and review that to try to actually make sense of that. So and there's a little bit of feeling lost, potentially, that you're like, okay, we've got this big pile of information, and I have to somehow turn this into something actually usable at the end. And there's a kind of a big gulf right now between the amount of information I feel like I comprehend and the thing that needs to be done. So that would be a normal feeling at this point, but you now have a whole bunch of tools at your disposal in terms of the information that we have given you in the README, the information that's in the existing server code that you can look over and figure out how that stuff works. So even though it might not be clear right now, part of the game is figuring out how to make that clear. So you've got a good starting point with all the code that's there. And you're going to have to read through that server code like Brady kind of jumped through. And my typical engineer reaction in a kickoff meeting like this is, okay, I'm kind of getting a feel for, like, we looked at this file, so that's important. We looked at this file, so that's important. And that's about the extent of my takeaway. I need to go back and review it. But having the high-level overview that Brady gave will make it easier. When I go back and review, I'll be like, oh, that's right. Brady said this about this thing, and he said that say is going to be similar to move, and here's move, and stuff like that. So let's see. Brady said you'll probably have questions in the future. You will probably have questions in the future. It's always the case. After the kickoff, you try to think of everything you can to ask about during the kickoff, because you have the client right there as a captive audience, and sometimes it can be difficult to get quick answers out of them later. That said, nobody ever thinks of all the questions during the kickoff because the system's too complicated and you're still awash in new information. But the more kickoff meetings like this you have, and the more experience you get working on a particular tech, the better you'll get at knowing which questions to ask during the meeting. And for me, that would take several meetings. But after a while, I've developed this list of things in the field in which I was working. I'm like, that's right, I need to ask about this, I need to ask about that, and so on. You know, sort of a bullet list of things that we'd go ask about. If the client said they needed a feature like this, we had a list of questions we could ask that we developed over the course of many meetings and many questions with the client. So I think that's all I have to say. So yeah, what Brady said about the suggested order, and jump in and try to build your mental model of how this system works. So it might be a little unclear now, but you probably have some idea that there's a server side and there's the client side, the front end. And so you've at least got that in your mental model. And there's some connections, and you know pusher's in there somewhere, and you know rest is in there somewhere to connect these two things. So just take what you know on your map of how the system works and start exploring those boundaries and pushing that out until you're comfortable enough to do things like get the server going and add commands to the server and stuff. So that would be my plan of attack. But whatever works best for you guys is also good. Anybody have anything else? Brady, or any other questions?
Very quiet this morning.
Is either everybody's chomping at the bit or they're deer in the headlights? Still processing is exactly what I would expect you guys to be doing at this point. I think when a lot of people get started working with computers, there's this, dare I say, compulsion, this need, and I feel it, this need to like start coding right now. Oh my gosh, I need to start coding right now. But that's really not how people tend to start these projects. They tend to start them by not coding right now and exploring a lot and getting a feel for how the system is laid out and how it comes together. And that pays off dividends later. So if you just jump in and start coding now, you will eventually learn the layout of the system, but you might learn it through making piles and piles of errors and redoing a lot of work. But if you spend some time up front, like 1 or 2 hours would be kind of, in my mind, that's kind of a minimum of just exploring the code, taking notes, writing diagrams of how the code relates to it, like getting a feel for how all this is done will make everything easier later, because you'll be like, oh, I need to add another server command. I know exactly where to do that because I've already explored this and gotten a feel for it. Anyway, go explore and see how it works. And start hacking away. We'll be around for questions, of course.
Yeah, ask questions, everyone. If you're stuck or if something is not working like it's supposed to, definitely don't spend 3 hours staring at the same error. Like ask questions. It very well may be that I did something wrong, like I set something up wrong or I put something incorrect. So don't assume the error is yours. It might be something weird with Django or some other odd interaction. But keep moving with this.
All right. A lot of cool pieces of tech are going to come together to see this happen. Can't wait to see how it progresses. Alrighty, gang. Have a good day of hacking, and we'll be around, but if we don't talk to you before then, we'll talk to you tomorrow at 8. Catch y'all later.
See y'all.